Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Pitch Talk.
We are fans of football dropping vlogs, videos and podcasts on the beautiful game.
Check out our videos on YouTube and Instagram's IGTV,
including special feature segments,
5 minutes with the G,
the Straight Shootin View,
coaching with JBK. We produce, record and edit video content
and audio on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts,
Verbal, Podomatic,
Anchor,
Spotify
and other podcast platforms.
Join the Pitch Talk revolution on Twitter, Instagram,
Facebook
and www.pitch-talk.com.
The pitch is where we eat.
The pitch is where we sleep.
And the pitch is where we talk.
I can see you now. I can see you now and then. I can see you now.
Welcome to
the Straight Shootin View.
What is up, people? My name is Straight Shootin LJA, and welcome to another episode of the Straight Shootin View. Now, I'm gonna deviate from the script just a touch because I'm gonna talk about women's football. I know I usually leave this to Jamie Bailey, aka Coach JBK, coaching with JBK, for all you need and want to know about the women's game. Check out Coaching with JBK. JBK works in the women's game, studies the women's game, and is a major part of the women's game in helping the women's game. Speaking of helping the women's game, one thing I just want to read out just quickly. The government will launch an in-depth review of domestic women's football this summer. This is originally from the 23rd of April 2022. The review will look at how to deliver growth both at elite and grassroots level in women's football. The findings are expected to be published by the end of the year. The time is right for a thorough review of the women's game to ensure all is being done to support its further growth, Sports Minister Nigel Huddleston said back in April of 2022. It is clear that an assessment of the value of the women's and girls' game is needed to ensure it's properly financed for the long term. The review will be independently chaired and supported by an expert advisory panel. It comes before a major summer for women's sport, with England hosting Euro 2022 from the 6th of July until the 31st of July, which will be broadcast across the BBC, and is expected to look at how to achieve greater parity with the men's game, focusing on commercialisation, spectator support and media interest. So, commercialisation, spectator support and media interest are the three focuses. Come back to that one later. This follows the fan-led review of football governance, which I talked about on a Straight Shootin View episode, published last November by ex-sports minister Tracy Crouch, who recommended a review of the women's game. The women's game has made huge progress in recent years, and at grassroots level has become the most played team sport for women and girls in England, with 3 million registered players and 12,000 registered teams. Great news to hear that. However, both the COVID-19 pandemic and the men's game fan-led review highlighted the shallow resources within the women's elite game, which has the potential to affect its long-term growth. The sport has also been given another boost of confirmation that the Women's World Cup and European Championship have been added to the crown jewels of British sporting events, securing free-to-air coverage. Lot to take in there. Now, this review of women's football, this government-led review, I am all for it, but it needs to lead to action, because there's a lot that needs to be actioned in terms of the women's game. Greater parity was mentioned in that statement, and I have always said that the men's game potentially needs to move out of the way to allow women's football to really and truly flourish. I did say that about 7-8 years ago, and obviously the landscape has changed, but the fact is there's more than enough money to go around, and it needs to be split more equitably. So there are certain other issues in the women's game in terms of pay structure and that kind of thing. I might do a Straight Shootin View episode on that, because there have been fights in the US, Canada, among other places, about equal and or fair pay for women's footballers in comparison to the men's team. So that's a whole separate issue unto itself. Just focusing on this government-led review that's going to happen this summer. And it is one of them ones where delivering growth at elite and grassroots level, you could actually say that they are two separate things, and they really need to be tackled separately and equally, because growth at grassroots level is a different kettle of fish to growth at elite level. Those are different. Those, I said, are both different kettles of fish. Grassroots is mainly about facilities, whereas at elite level, it is more about the commercialization. It is more about the media coverage. So those are kind of two different animals, and that's me speaking mainly from experience of the men's game. I will admit that much. But it is one of them was the value of women's football is pretty clear. There's the physical attributes such as exercise, but there's also the mental attributes as well. The mental positive gains. And as myself and Coach JBK, Jamie Bailey, talked about during the pandemic, I think it was in late 2020, when we did a special feature about youth football and the effects of lockdown on that, especially the first lockdown. It was one of them ones where a lot of kids were disproportionately affected and very negatively affected by the lockdowns. And it was mentioned in that statement about COVID-19 and the pandemic really having an impact on women's football. Just as it's growing nicely and ticking along, everything got shut down. So it's one of them where it's like that exposing the shallow depth in terms of resources, as much as it was a bad thing, it may end up being a major positive, because now it is being shown. Now it is being looked at and looked at properly and delved into deeper because of this government-led review. So it is one of them where I said, like, the confirmation of the Women's World Cup and European Championships being added to the crown jewels of British sporting events, I think is a massive step in the right direction. And as long as they are promoted as such, that could have a massive impact on the women's game. Because look at the impact that the London 2012 Olympics had on women's football. Need I even say more? That was massive to women's football in England, in this country, in Britain in general. It was absolutely huge. And those positive ripple effects are still being felt now. But at the same time, it is one of them ones, take COVID-19 out of the equation, and the growth, some have said, it's not grown, the women's game has not grown as much as most were expecting. But I think that would be largely in part due to support. Because as much as the men's game, look how much of a financial cash cow that is, but look at the greed attached to that as well. So it's one of those, there are a lot of clubs whose women's and men's teams are not on the same wavelength. They're not treated the same. The women's teams at certain clubs are treated, for lack of a better way of putting this, like the red-headed stepchild. Like how WCW was treated within the Turner Corporation. Some football clubs, some men's clubs treat the women's side of their clubs like that. So it is one of them where you've only got to look at that. And there are some teams doing brilliant things with their women's sides. Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal. They are doing brilliant things. Even Man United to an extent. So there are sides waking up and seeing the value of women's football. And for me, it's a case of football for all. That's what needs to be the kind of underlying factor here. The underlying kind of philosophy is that it is football for all. Whether boy, girl, woman, man, it is football for all. So it is one of them where obviously the atmosphere around women's games, when I've went to I think it was the 2015 women's FA Cup final with Chelsea and Notts County, very entertaining game. There were a lot of children there, and that's great to see. And it is one of them ones where it's like that kind of more inviting atmosphere. You've got to capitalize on that, because it is different to the men's game. It is different. Women's physiology is naturally different. So the game is going to be played at a different pace, at a different level of physicality. That's not to say it's inferior. It's different. And different is not always inferior. And different on a general basis should be supported. As opposed to just, yeah, we'll break you off some crumbs there. That's my take on it anyway. And this in-depth review of domestic women's football is tremendous. But what do you think? Do you think a government-led review of women's football can lead to tangible change? I think it can, but the right things need to be brought up during this review that can be then implemented. But what do you think? I've been Straight Shootin LJA. I want to know what you think. Pitch-talk.com is the official website for everything Pitch Talk. At Pitch Talk on Twitter. At Pitch Talk on Instagram. Twitter, tweet with us, follow us, see what we are up to. Facebook.com/Pitch Talk. Become a fan, become a friend, become a member of the group. Join the footballing revolution we are working so hard to create. Also, remember the Women's European Championships are coming up this summer. So try and watch as many games as you can and support not just the Lionesses, but the other sides in there as well. Women's football does need support at elite and grassroots level. That's what this review is all about. Support the Pitch Talk revolution as well. Remember, pitch-talk.com is the official website. You can catch our podcast on Anchor, on Ghana, GAANA, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, anywhere you pick up your podcast, Amazon Music as well. Anywhere you pick up your podcast, you can find us. Or you can listen on our website direct. We have all of our episodes up there, plus video versions as well. Vlog previews are up on Instagram, at Pitch Talk on Instagram as well. You know what? I have been Straight Shootin LJA, and on behalf of myself, well, that's the only person I can talk for is myself. I will see you next time on the Straight Shootin View. Thanks for your time, people.
Join the Pitch Talk revolution.
Check out the official Pitch Talk website.
www.pitch-talk.com. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Pitch Talk.
We are fans of football dropping vlogs, videos and podcasts on the beautiful game.
Check out our videos on YouTube and Instagram's IGTV.
Including special feature segments,
5 minutes with the G.
The Straight Shootin View,
coaching with JBK. We produce, record and edit video content.
and
Audio on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts,
Verbal, Podomatic,
Anchor.
Spotify.
and other podcast platforms.
Join the Pitch Talk revolution on Twitter, Instagram.
Facebook.
And www.pitch-talk.com.
The pitch is where we eat.
The pitch is where we sleep.
And the pitch is where we talk.
I can see you now.